Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Marvin Byrd. Today, we're going to continue our discussion on classroom culture and the importance of classroom culture. Last time I shared with you my two of my 5 C's of classroom culture, and today I'm going to share a little bit more with you. Before I get to that, I want to remind you that here we believe that teachers are leaders, and as a result, our purpose is to equip you, the teacher, with the skills and information that you need in order to lead your students to success. That's what we're all about here. That's what we're all about. So let's backtrack a little bit because we are talking about culture. We're talking about culture here. Culture is great. Culture is king. I want to give you my definition of culture. Last time I shared with you that the word culture, the origin of that word, it speaks to agriculture and preparation of the land. And in a way as well, you are, when you're building your culture in your classroom, you're preparing that space so the students can succeed, so that they can learn and grow. Culture is very important. Now, I also gave you my definition of culture. My definition of culture is this. It's simple. It's simply this: the quality of the student experience in your classroom. That's my definition of culture, the quality of the student experience in your classroom. Now, that can be either good or bad. That could be either good or bad, but it's incumbent upon you, to do the things necessary in order to make sure that it's a good experience for everybody, to make sure that the students are not part of a toxic culture in your classroom, a negative culture in your classroom. And it used to be that simply because you're the teacher and you said so, that was it. That was all that it took in order to compel students to follow the rules, do the right thing, make good decisions. But it's not that way anymore. Times have changed. We don't paddle students anymore. There used to be a time where we did. We paddled students, and when the parents learned that the child was paddled, they paddled the student again, or something even more. But we don't do that anymore. And so now, in this day and age, we have to rely on leadership. We have to rely on leadership. That's why we spread this message that teachers are leaders. And I want to remind you that, I'll never sell. Well, no, I'm not selling anything. I'm not asking for any of your money. I'm not asking for money, but I'll never submit anything to you as the silver bullet. Like, this is it. This is the one thing that you need. I can remember at certain districts. I'm not going to name a district. I can remember districts that would fly these people in. They would pay for a private car to bring them in, stay at a nice hotel, and they would come to us and they would say, "Hey, you want to know why you're not succeeding with students? Do you want to know why your test data looks the way it does? It's because you're not doing this." No, not going to do that. I'm not going to do that, because I understand, just as you do, that with education there are very few universals. As educators, as leaders, we have to experiment. We have to experiment. Try this. Okay, this worked. I'll tweak this a little bit, see what happens next time. I'll continue to try stuff with this one student. It's just not taking, but I'll go back and get some more tools and I'll keep trying with them. And so if a little bit of change happens, I can be happy about that. And I can also be happy knowing that I didn't give up on Johnny. So that's what we do as teachers. And I totally understand that there are very few universals, but I do believe that this is one of those universals. This is one of those universals that I think can help all students. It can help all students. And it's important that every teacher pay close attention to the culture of their classroom, because as a leader, you are the architect of your environment. You're the architect of your environment. Ultimately, you're responsible for the culture in your classroom. What now? If a teacher were to abdicate themselves from their responsibility, then the students they'll take it over, and potentially that could be a bad thing. That could be a negative thing, because at times, students can be not so nice to each other. And so as a leader, you have to step in and take charge and take that responsibility for creating a strong classroom culture. Now, the two C's that I shared with you last time, two of my 5 C's that I shared with you last time. The first one was clarity. Clarity. Transparency is a stabilizing force. It's a stabilizing force. When you talk about a building, even with adults, how many of you have been frustrated by a principal who lacked transparency, or you didn't understand the expectations, or it was unclear, you couldn't really grasp it, or there was an event coming up and there were just few details shared with the staff, and it's just unclear. Now you got students asking you these questions and parents are asking you these questions. It can be very frustrating where there is limited transparency. And also, when it comes to you as a leader in the classroom, when there is limited transparency in terms of expectations, in terms of what does an A look like? What do I have to do in order to hit that mark? Students can get frustrated by that, because we should be encouraging students to set goals, to reverse engineer. Okay, what's it going to take to get at least a B on this assignment? Set that goal. And then what are the action steps? Well, in order to create the action steps, we need to give them a clear definition of what it looks like to earn that B or more on that particular assignment. So we've got to be clear. We've got to be crystal clear. And what that's going to do is that's going to ultimately help students grow, because they can set clear goals for themselves, because you've given them those clear expectations. So that was the first C that I shared with you. The second C that I shared with you was connection. Now, remember, it takes more than just title. No teacher should be relying on the fact that they are the teacher in the classroom in order to compel students to follow the directions and do the right thing. That's not the way it works anymore. And I think largely today and age, no one gets into teaching thinking that that's okay. I really do think that 99.9% of teachers, they understand that in order to lead a classroom, to serve as a teacher, you've got to show that human side. You've got to make that connection. So take time to be vulnerable, take time to laugh, take time to get to know who your students are and what things that they like. That those things are important. Because I have discovered, working as a principal, the one thing I discovered is that often when students say my teacher doesn't like me, that means that there's no connection there. There's no connection there, and that teacher has some work to do in order to build that connection. Now, it's not all the time, but often I've seen that to be the case, that a teacher just hasn't done enough work to build that connection. And it could be really interesting at times, because you as a teacher, you can feel like, oh, wow, I'm doing all these things. Well, I think I told the story last time about the five love languages, in that, people they receive, um and since then they've done five languages of appreciation for workplaces. So let me use that, appreciation. Okay, so people receive appreciation in different ways, and I think that what happens sometimes is we'll think that we're doing a good job in terms of showing our appreciation, in terms of building bridges with students, but that's not for that student, that they're not necessarily receiving it that way. Perhaps there's another angle that you need to approach that particular student. So it can be tricky. It really can be tricky at times when it comes to building bridges and making connections with students. But it's important. You've got to do that. You've got to connect with each and every one of your students, no matter how challenging it could be at times. And so that brings us to the third C. The third C, this is new, and that is, you need candid conversations. Candid conversations. Now, when I was a teacher, the way I put my room together was I have my space, right? You got to have your space, right? So I had like an L shape, right? I had like a table and I had my desk right here. And that was my space. That was my yard, right? And I had underneath this table right here, I had my refrigerator, my microwave, and then my desk drawer here. Here I had my snacks, so I was good to go. But anyways, on the end here, I had a student desk, right? I had a student desk because I knew that I wanted to make a concentrated effort to make sure that I was talking to students constantly. I was having one-on-ones, maybe a group of 3 or 4 students, but I made sure that I was having students come up to my desk so that we can have candid conversations. Now, those conversations could have centered around, hey, what'd you do this weekend? Could have centered around, hey, how's the class going? Any suggestions for me? What are you hearing the rest of the students say? What can I do to what can I do to improve, to help you learn and grow in this classroom? And then lastly, we talked about feedback. I gave feedback. And with feedback, you have to keep in the front of your mind that, as I spoke of before, that all students are different. All students are different. And so some students, they're going to be able to take feedback straightforward. You just, boom, you can just hit them with it. And then some students, because of past performance, you're going to have to be a little more gentle. You're going to have to do the positive, the delta instead of negative, and then the positive. The sandwich method. And so you're gonna have to preface it a little bit, because you want them to continue to give effort. You want to praise the effort, but you have to give that feedback. And when we talk about really these candid conversations, you have to really know the students first before you start going there. That's why that connection is important, because sometimes when you're giving feedback, you're making a small withdrawal. What you're doing is you're saying, hey, you remember, we've made a connection, and I want to leverage that connection just a little bit so I can give you this feedback, because I think that you really, really need to know this, because it's going to help you get better. So I want to remind you that when you're giving feedback to your students, you need to make sure that your goal, it's goal oriented. It's goal oriented. Really, your students should have goals. They should have goals, and that's why they need your feedback in order to meet those goals. So I want your feedback to be really sharp. I want it to be, I don't want it to be generic. It needs to be to the point. And and if you have to preface it, just preface it with love, and just letting them know that, hey, I know that this is going to help you do better. And so I want to submit this to you. This is what I'm seeing from you. And I think that if you just make this little change, you're going to do much better. And I know that can be difficult. I know that can be difficult. Even, myself, I've had times where I wasn't candid. I wasn't candid with the student, and I didn't give them the honest truth. And I told them that I told the student that it was good when it wasn't good. It wasn't good. And with a few tweaks, it could have been much better. And the reason that I didn't do that, the reason that I avoided that conversation was because I didn't want to hurt her feelings. I was avoiding being candid. But you can't build a strong culture in your classroom without candidness, without these kinds of conversations, because ultimately what they do is they bring you closer when you build this community, this culture of candor. Because when you're that way with the students, when you're candid, you're having candid conversations with the students, they can turn around and have candid conversations with each other. Now you've got a wonderful community in your classroom. Wow, who wouldn't want to be a part of that community that's filled with candidness that is designed to help everyone learn and grow? That's awesome. Because here's the cost. There is a cost that is associated with avoiding that conversation. There's a cost associated with avoiding that conversation. And the biggest cost of avoiding these candid conversations regarding feedback is that the student doesn't learn and grow. Student doesn't learn and grow. The student doesn't understand. They have no understanding of where they truly are, how they, as a student, where they truly are in terms of pursuing their goals, where they truly are in determining if they have the skill set, if they've met the mark in order to continue to pursue their vision of success. And so there's a hidden cost when a teacher chooses to avoid having those conversations with a student. And at the end of the day, I think that students, they understand and they realize when they have a teacher who's avoiding having those discussions, and that's just an opportunity is missed, and something is just overall missing when a teacher is not candid with their students about their performance. And I want to share with you this. So check this out. Check out this graphic. This graphic comes from the book Radical Candor. And it's definitely, I suggest you read this book. It's a wonderful book. So as you look at this graphic, you'll see that we're trying to achieve, obviously we want to be here, radical candor, right? This is where we want to be. So we're balancing between caring personally, which you want to care, you do as a teacher, you want to care personally, but you also want to challenge directly. So you're trying to achieve a balance between those two things. You want to achieve a balance between those two things, caring personally and challenging directly. So we're going to go around here, and we're going to end on radical candor, because that's where you want to be. So let's start here. Ruinous empathy. I don't know why I smile whenever I read that word, ruinous. I don't think I've ever said that word out loud until right now. Ruinous empathy. And that is, it looks like this. It looks like a teacher who's just too kind. They're too kind. They don't want to do any harm, and they're overly sensitive. And what you get here is a teacher who will, they'll accept anything from a student. It's not exactly what they were looking for, but they'll take it anyway and just, you got an A, you got all your points. All right. That's what it ruinous empathy. Very little feedback. Let's just go along to get along. You got all your points. And what that leads to ignorance and no change. Ignorance and no change on the part of the student. So the student doesn't know what they don't know. And so they don't change. There's no opportunity to get better because they're not aware of the adjustments that they need to make because their leader, the teacher, that didn't give them that information. At least ignorance and no change. And we don't want that. We don't want that. We don't want that. Let's keep going. Here we have manipulative insincerity. Manipulative insincerity. Ooh, this is obviously not good. Manipulative insincerity. And that's a quid pro quo. This for that. This for that. There's no challenging or caring about overall growth. It looks like a teacher who is just seeking compliance. Let's just get through this. Let's just do this. Let's just get this done. And we got about 22 more minutes until the bell rings. Maybe we'll give you some alone time with your phone. If you just get this done, just do this. I'll take it. And let's just work our way to the bell. Let's just get to the bell. And what does that lead to? That leads to mistrust. A mistrust and no change because, quite possibly the students, they realize and understand what's really going on here. They kind of understand that, hey, this teacher doesn't necessarily care, whether I, master this material. They just want to give me these worksheets so I can not bother them. That's not good. We obviously don't want to be that. Those of you who are watching this, definitely, that's not you. That's definitely not you. No to manipulative insincerity. Let's keep going. Here we have challenge. We have a little heavy on the challenge directly side. And so we have an obnoxious aggression. And that's heavily on the challenging directly, but there's no care there. There's no caring for the person. So that leads to defensiveness and little change. And we've seen this in the classroom. We've seen this in the classroom. And what this looks like is we have a leader who's belittling people, embarrassing people, throwing people under the bus. And what this looks like as a teacher, it's probably, someone who's a teacher who's just unlovingly challenging a student regarding the student's decisions or their mistakes. And it's just I see it as such a public thing where the teacher's just calling a student out. And how many of you know what that looks like when you just call that student out for what they're doing? You name a name. When you have a classroom full of people who are talking, you name a name, and that student, you know what that student's going to say. A student's going to say, out of all these people talking in here, you call on me. So that's that defensiveness. That's defensiveness. And maybe you've put yourself in that situation unknowingly. You didn't mean to do that. That's okay. Because I also know that those of you watching this, you wouldn't lean towards obnoxious aggression because you do care for your students. But there are times when well-meaning teachers can find themselves in this area, sending this message of obnoxious aggression and that leads to defensiveness and little change. Defensiveness and little change. So the student is just solely focused on defending themselves. They're not focused on the material. They're focused on defending themselves because their teacher, their leader has given them a feeling that they don't like. And so now they've got to fight back. They've got to defend themselves. Here's what we want. We want radical candor. Radical candor. That's the sweet spot. That's the sweet spot. So where we're caring for our students, we're caring personally, but we're also challenging them directly. We care enough to challenge them directly. What does that look like? That looks like, hey, pulling them to the side. Hey, come over here. I want to talk to you. Your fly's open. Your fly's open. You need to check your fly. You know? How many of you have been frustrated by your colleagues because you went through the whole day with a little something right here in your mouth, huh? Or maybe not the whole day, but you went through from lunch until the end of the day, you had a little something right here. Or from the morning until lunch, you had a little something right here. Nobody told you. Nobody. Hey, because I care for you, let me pull you to the side and say, hey, you got a little something in your mouth. You need to check that. I care for you personally. Also going to be direct with you about what an issue is. And so for a teacher, that's just you challenging in a caring manner. And it just, I like what I have right here. So I love your effort. Your effort is awesome. But I think you're gonna see even better results if you make just these few adjustments. I know you're frustrated, but you are so close. You're almost there. You can do this. See, I care for you, showing that I care, but I'm also challenging you directly. I'm also courageous enough to give you the information that you need in order to make an adjustment and learn and grow. You have to do that, ladies and gentlemen. You have to do that. That's what your students are counting on you to do this. They need you to do this. Now, I understand that courage is also a big part of this at times, because you're not always certain on how the conversation is going to go. But if you know you're doing what's right for your students, if you're going through the steps of making sure that you're building a strong culture, you're connecting with students. You see, when you connect, the other thing is when you connect with students, that gives you permissions. That gives you certain permissions. Like you've got certain privileges to do certain things, such as challenge directly. So I want you to think about that. So we'll stop right there. I've given you 3 of my C's. I gave you clarity. You need clarity. I gave you connection. Today I gave you candid conversations. So that's plenty to think about until we meet again next time, and I finish it out with the other 2 C's of classroom culture. I thank you so much for your time. I thank you for watching. Those of you who are watching, I thank you for listening. Those of you who are listening, thank you so much. And until we meet again, please don't forget that teachers are leaders.